Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. This is Gretchen from Lighten Up and Thrive, Joyful Living for Mind, Body, and Soul. Dr. Jerry and I are really delighted that so many of you have joined us today for this free webinar on transitions and transformations, learning how to thrive in the midst of change. This is a really popular topic for everyone, so we're really excited to have you with us today. We also want to point out our website for you, which is www.lightenupandthrive.com. That's LIGHTENUPANDTHRIVE.com, lightenupandthrive.com. Because this is our first webinar, Jerry and I would like to just share brief introductions about us as your presenters. Dr. Jerry and I have really similar but unique backgrounds. They really complement one another as well. We are both educators and mind, body, soul coaches, as well as lifetime learners that are passionate about teaching and helping others to experience powerful shifts in their lives. We decided that we could reach so many more people by doing webinars, so we created our Lighten Up and Thrive, Joyful Living for Mind, Body, and Soul website, and also a Facebook page so that we could share inspirational materials, programs, and just the thoughts that we have about a variety of subjects. We also created a mastermind Facebook coaching program. We'll mention it later, but I'll tell you, talk about change. I don't know about you, Jerry, but at times this has felt like giving birth, putting this all together, but it sure has been a lot of fun. So just a little bit more about me. I'm Gretchen, and my passion is to facilitate powerful, transformational shifts at a core level for people so that they can attain their goals and create a life of their choosing. I believe that transformations occur by discovering, reframing, and shifting limiting beliefs, which is key to all of our teaching and our techniques. I'm a retired nurse of 30 years, and I specialize in medical and general hypnotherapy and stress and weight management. And I also incorporate a lot of other powerful energy and healing modalities, along with aromatherapy in my practice. But for me, my journey that's been really significant and a huge part of my own transformation is to have had the distinct privilege to study under renowned masters such as Dr. Deepak Chopra, Dr. Darren Weissman of the Lifeline Technique, and along with other visionaries like Vianna Steibel from Theta Healing, and also authors like Denise Lynn. And this is actually how Jerry and I met, within a training with Dr. Darren Weissman. That's where it all started. Then we decided that we really wanted to journey together, so we finished studying with Theta Healing and then also with Denise Lynn as soul coaches. So I'd like to introduce Jerry now and have Jerry just tell a little bit about herself as well.
Hello, everyone. I'm so excited to be with everyone tonight. My passion is helping other people connect to their inner wisdom on the soul level. I am a soul success coach, and my goal is to help you uncover obstacles to free any limiting beliefs that you have. As Gretchen mentioned, we've been working together with various trainings with Dr. Weissman and Vianna and Denise Lynn, and we are so excited to be sharing our journey with you. Thank you so much.
That's awesome. Thanks, Jerry. Now, we know that every single one of you is here for your own unique reasons and probably wondering what you're going to learn today. Not only will you learn some really beneficial strategies, but you'll also learn how to handle change more successfully. Today we're going to explore several key points around the concept of change, and ones that you can implement right away. We've broken this presentation down into the following key topics about change, and you can see that hopefully on the Learning Outcomes slide. The first is our reaction to change. We'll explore how people commonly react to change. The second is the importance of change, and we'll help you recognize why change is actually quite necessary. And the third is seeing change differently. We call this shifting your lens of perception, helping you to recognize that even though the experience of change can be difficult, it can still be looked at in a positive way. And the fourth thing is accepting change. Change can actually bring us a richer, more fulfilling life if we learn to embrace it and accept it. So there were a few questions that we presented in our introductory email. And that first question is, does change hit you hard? If you answered yes, I'd like you just to pause for a moment for some self-reflection. It could be because change, when taken at face value, represents an upset in the status quo, a disruption from your comfort zone. When the change is something big, it can send your stress level sky high and rob you of your peace of mind. But we have to ask ourselves why. We know that change is inevitable, and there's really no way around it. But people still fret about it, worry about it, and worry about what's lurking around the corner, and wonder when that proverbial other shoe is going to drop. And that's a really challenging way to go through life. But remember this, every single person responds differently to change. Some people thrive on it, and others deplore it. So this webinar is to help you acquire knowledge to understand and transition through change effectively just by some really simple strategies that we're going to cover today. So how well do you know yourself? If you're like most folks, your reaction might be one of anger, confusion, or maybe even sadness. And these reactions are perfectly normal, and they're to be expected. So let's begin our time by taking a few minutes to just explore more ways that people experience and view change. I'd like you to pull out your first activity worksheet. This is the one that has a title on of Pick a Card. And you'll notice there are 6 cards on this worksheet. This is worksheet number 1, Pick a Card. In the upper left box, you'll see, for me, the idea of change most closely resembles the season of, and I'd like you to pick a season. And then I'd like you to be able to answer why. You might pick the middle card on the right side that's, when having to deal with change, I am most like which animal? And then I'd like you just to be able to say why you've chosen that animal. So just look over those. I'm going to give you a few minutes just to check those out and just pick a card. And then we're going to ask for some input, some feedback on this. So go ahead and do that now. All right. I'm really curious to see which card that you've chosen. I'd love some feedback. All right. Here's one coming in from the chat. And I love this one. So, Sally, thank you. You chose an animal that represents you. And here's why. And you chose a hummingbird. I love hummingbirds. And I love also that you're referencing that book on Animal Speaks. It's a wonderful book. I always notice that if there are certain animals that are presenting themselves, and I'm curious as to why. And I love what you're also writing here about why a hummingbird represents how you deal with change, and that it's a bird that flies really quickly and can go from flower to flower to flower, and is also really fast. They're like lightning speed, aren't they? So I love that. That's a great animal to have chosen. And let's see, did anybody pick a season? Is there anybody on the phone that wants to press star 2 and just let us know what season you might have chosen? Who's this we've got on the line? Hi, what's your name?
Denise.
Hi. So curious, which card did you pick?
You know, I'm not having a hard time accessing it, but I chose one anyway. I chose a winter.
Beautiful, and how come?
I love winter. It's just very crisp and beautiful and cozy.
Beautiful. What else does winter represent for you?
It's just a very happy time for me. I like the way it feels. I like the way it smells. I like the food that's cooked. I like the way people act in the winter. I just like it.
Okay, good. I'm curious, what part of the country are you in?
Glendale, California. It's warm right now.
Okay, all right. Yeah, so that's wonderful. Yes, I remember winters in California. They're not huge shifts, but they can be definitely some changes too. So thank you. I appreciate you sharing on that.
Thank you.
Thanks. We have Janet. Let me go to the chat box. I see that you picked spring, and because it's a season of growth and rebirth. Absolutely. Beautiful. I love that. So let's move on to this next part, and that's just really about understanding that change can bring up all kinds of emotions. Sometimes it can feel like a fierce storm, and sometimes it almost feels like that fierce storm is barreling down upon us, and it creates fear for some people, anxiety for others, worry, or anticipation. I love this acronym for fear, that false evidence appearing real. Or, as somebody said yesterday, Ted, false evidence about reality. So however you want to look at fear, it really is something that all of us have to address when we're going through a process of change. So it's no wonder then that we put so much effort towards maintaining the status quo of our lives. After all, we know how the status quo feels. And it really feels familiar and safe to most of us, right? And we also know that change can feel scary. And because of that, a lot of people resist it. Are you aware of how you resist change? I'm sure every single one of us listening to this has an awareness of our own resistance when it comes to change. Even if change promises something new, though, we can still feel its uncertainty, which makes us fearful, because after all, we are those creatures of habit. So I'm just going to demonstrate this with a really quick activity. And if you're sitting down, just stay seated. And I'd like you just to fold your arms. Just fold your arms for a moment. And now I want you to notice something. Which arm did you fold on the top? Did you fold your right over your left or your left over your right? Just notice. Notice how comfortable and natural that feels, the way that you automatically folded your arms. And now let's shift this up a little bit. I want you to reverse your arms. So put your left arm on the top and swap it out if your right arm was on the top in the first time that you did that. And just take a moment and do that. Notice, just notice, how does this new way of folding your arms feel? It's not easy to do, for it will likely feel less comfortable and perhaps even a little awkward, right? What is your natural instinct telling you to do with that awkwardness that you're feeling? Did you even feel that urge to fold your arms back to your normal way immediately? So this activity really just demonstrates how change can feel to us. And this is really a key aspect here because we feel change. And we feel change in our bodies in particular, and certainly in our minds and even in our emotions. So simply put, change feels uncomfortable, unusual, and different. So it is natural to want what's comfortable and familiar instead. But here's the thing. No matter how much we may feel like resisting change, it's still going to happen. This means that you've got to be prepared to handle it because it is inevitable. So if change is going to happen whether we like it or not, perhaps we can learn to accept its importance. So let's explore the importance and see if we can better appreciate the necessity of change in our lives. One of the biggest reasons that change is necessary in our lives is that through it we experience personal growth. But even though change is necessary, that doesn't mean it has to be big for growth to happen. I'm going to just demonstrate this by asking you to participate in another activity. If you're not seated, I'd like you to be seated. So just take a moment and be seated in a chair. Do this. This is key here, okay? Just please place your backs firmly against the back of your chair. Now, while keeping your back firmly against the back of the chair and your hands firmly down at your sides, I want you to try and stand up with your back firmly against the back of the chair and your hands down at your sides. Don't put them on the armrest. Just try and stand like that. All right, what did you notice? You might notice that was kind of hard to do that way, right? So let's just illustrate how you can accomplish this with just a really small shift, a small change. Let's prove how easy this task can be just by this one slight variation. Simply move your back just a little bit forward in your chair, away from the back of the chair, and then try and stand up again. That's right. I hope all of you can see how much easier it is to do that task this time, just by making that really small change. So here's the point. All of us at one time or another has had the experience of being stuck and then realizing afterwards that it was one small change that then allowed something to happen to create that shift. So it's all about just making small adjustments. But here's the thing, even small changes are absolutely necessary for us to move forward. So how does this activity illustrate the power of change, even a simple change? And how can we be more willing to welcome change and see its importance in our lives? Who'd like to respond to that? Were you surprised at just making one small shift that created a change? Anybody surprised by that? I know that when I did that for myself, I was actually really surprised because it just brought attention to the fact of what I don't even think about when I'm trying to go from a seated position to a standing position. And it really was just that one small change that made all the difference in the world. What did you think, Jerry? Could you tell a big difference on that one?
Yes, I could. I was amazed how just moving forward a little bit enabled me to stand up much easier, which to me is a metaphor for just taking little small steps and moving forward to make a big shift too.
Absolutely, yeah. And actually, it made me laugh when I did it because it was something that I don't even think about and just do it. And so it's funny when we kind of break things down into the smaller steps, which has a lot of value in it as well. So let's examine why change, even though clearly important to our growth and development, is still difficult to handle. Now, I'd like you to pull out your worksheet number 2. And this one has a title on it, worksheet number 2, Transitioning Through Change. And it has 2 pages to it. So on this one, I want you to notice that on the far left, there's an ending, and then in the middle, there's a neutral zone, and then on the far right, there's a new beginning. And we're going to break this into a process so that you can really learn something about how to transition through change. Because the first thing that we want to do is to understand about change that it is an event. It is something external that happens. And as a result of this change, we have an emotional response to it. Even though this event happens oftentimes really suddenly, maybe it's, somebody's lost a job or a car accident, the time it takes to process doesn't happen as quickly. We're affected emotionally, and that takes a different amount of time to process. And that is unique to every single person. So with every event of change that happens, there's a much slower internal transition that we must also undergo. This internal transition happens in 3 distinct phases, and we're going to look at these individually. But I want you just to look at this upper part of your transitioning through change. Because in this process of transitioning through change, the key here is that we have to let go of how things used to be and go through a time of uncertainty and confusion in order to arrive at a place where there's a new beginning. To let go of the old and to enter a time of uncertainty can be difficult. But this time in the neutral zone is the necessary bridge that we must go across in order to arrive at a new beginning. So that first phase, and if you look down at the bottom of the slide, I have it so that you can put in your answers right there just to refer back to this. So let's talk about phase 1. This is to mourn and then let go. Something always comes to an end when we experience a change event, and we first have to allow ourselves time to mourn what's been lost and then let go of it, regardless of whether the ending is negative or positive. The trapeze artist, I think, is a great analogy. The trapeze artist has to let go of one bar that they're holding on to first before being able to grab hold of the next one. The single greatest reason why change is so difficult for us is that we don't mourn what has ended, good or bad, and then let go. Can all of you relate to that? How much we hold on to, and we really stay stuck in a lot of past events. And Jerry and I deal a lot with helping people clear this, and it's a really important thing to understand because we stubbornly hold on to just what used to be. I love this quote by André Gide. He's a French novelist, and he wrote that one doesn't discover new lands without consenting to lose sight of the shore for a very long time. I think that's a pretty provocative quote. And this quote really captures precisely what's going on for us once we finally mourn and let go. And when we do that, we enter phase 2 of this internal transition process called the neutral zone. It's during this middle phase that we find ourselves between what has ended and what has yet to begin. I want you to think back to our example of the trapeze artist. He has to let go of one bar. At the same time, he isn't really able to reach out yet and to grab hold of the next one because it hasn't arrived yet. Talk about divine timing issues, right? Timing really is everything. So for a while, our trapeze artist just appears lost in space, floating in emptiness. And if you look at some of the emotions on that left side of that ending into the neutral zone, and that's that quick event, that quick change, that's an external event, you'll see a lot of other emotions, like denial and shock and anger and frustration and even ambivalence before we even can get to the neutral zone. I'm struck looking at this at how much it also really resembles some of that grief process that we go through. So this empty space is what we call the neutral zone. And it can feel terrifying because it requires a great deal of faith and trust that something will be there, even though we may not be able to see it. I love this little girl's face on this slide. I think it just really captures that essence of being terrified, and it's almost as if I can really feel that emotion of terrifying when I just look at that cute little face. You can add these next 4 items to your worksheet too, because this is why the neutral zone can feel terrifying. For one thing, it's disorienting. We know that we're heading somewhere, but we don't know exactly how we're going to get there. It's also a time of high anxiety. Our life has been upset by change, which makes us question our ability to operate in something new. It's also a time of feeling vulnerable. Our weaknesses, our insecurities, our limitations may be revealed or explored in this phase. The things that we're normally able to hide or avoid may come out into the open at this time. And boy, can we get triggered, especially with those limiting beliefs. And the 4th thing is that it can be overwhelming. The change itself, plus any emotions, combined with the uncertainty that we're feeling during this phase, feels like a lot to deal with. But here's the good news. There's another point of view from the neutral zone. And this can be an exciting time. So I'd like you to add, that's a cute little face that really represents being excited. I love that. You can add these 4 points onto your worksheet as well so you can refer back to it. Our attitudes are what really allow us to accept and to shift and realign ourselves. And that really comes with this recognition to tap into the excitement of change. And that is number 1, because opportunity abounds. In the neutral zone, really everything and anything is possible. It's also a creative time. There are numerous ways our lives can morph into something new during this phase. We get to be creative in figuring out the new things that we want to become or to experience. So we want to be supportive to the concept of change. And the 3rd thing is that it reveals our strengths. While change can reveal our weaknesses and our vulnerabilities, the positive side is that it does also show us our strengths, all of our capabilities, and also our leadership potential as well. It also can reveal hidden talents. During this time, you just may discover hidden talents that you didn't even know that you had. So remember this, the key thing is that the neutral zone takes time. You have to be patient. You can't rush this process, no matter how uncomfortable it feels. Remember when you crossed your arms in that reverse fashion and it felt more uncomfortable? It's part of this neutral zone transition. And it really does mean that you've got to surrender yourself to this phase in the process, no matter how long it takes, because then you can enter into the 3rd phase in this transition through change. Because once you get through the neutral zone, you enter into this next phase of arriving at a new beginning. And this really is the internal transition process, because it's in this phase that you're ready for new beginnings, new growth, new activities, and you really allow all those new opportunities to enter into your life. So again, you might want to write those down in your worksheet, number 2, so that you can refer back to those. And just remember that arriving at the new beginning is that final phase of the internal transition that we come into alignment with. So new beginnings bring recharged energy levels, and you might notice that productivity increases, and even your morale. So the lesson here is that when you're ready and open to accepting a new beginning, it will be there, ready to catch you, just like this trapeze artist, right? And I'm going to ask you to share some examples that maybe are coming up for you when you're thinking about your process of change and what you've done in the past in this continuum. I'll start off just by giving one of these, and that is I recently became an empty nester. And what was really interesting about this is I did recognize that that was an event that happened in my life. And yes, I absolutely did go through a different process, and I had to let go of some of my identity as mom that still had children at home, and kind of went through some of those emotions and had to go through that phase of mourning and letting go and entering into the neutral zone, and then going up to that new beginnings and appreciating the opportunities and all the emotions that came up with that. And that is a time that my husband and I really decided that we were going to change some things up in our lives and do things maybe that we've been putting off to the side. So anybody want to press star 2 and raise your hand? We'd love to hear if there's a process of change that maybe we can even help you work through some of the emotional aspects through. So who do we have on the line?
This is Denise Garcia.
Hi, Denise. How about for you? What was a process of change or something that came up for you when we were going through that?
Well, it's been ongoing for a few months now, but it felt right to share it. I did the 5 days with Darren Weissman. You know about that for the Lifeline.
Oh, good for you. Oh, you know change.
Oh, let me tell you, it started cracking me open like an egg when I was there, maybe on day 2. But I find that it's more persistent now. That change is pressing me and pressing me.
Yeah.
And it's something I normally don't like.
Yeah. So how are you doing with that process of change? I'm sure you've had a lot of aha moments.
Oh, my God, beyond aha. Like, for instance, I go vacationing every summer with my girlfriend, and I don't want to leave my animals behind. What if this? What if that? What if something happens with my family? You know, like you mentioned earlier on about the shoe falling syndrome.
Yeah.
So I had a little bit of panic before I went, but I just soothed myself, and I decided that no matter what I do when I'm there, whoever I'm speaking with, whatever like when I'm swimming, I'm going to be fully in the moment of swimming. When I'm talking to somebody, I'm going to be fully in the moment of talking with that person and not let my mind pine or ponder or worry. And I did that pretty successfully during my 10-day stay on vacation.
Oh, that's really great. Did you use the upgrading the field to help you with it? You know, in Darren, when he does the upgrading the field, where he does the reconnection, the spirit to body, the spirit to mind.
Oh, no. Yeah, I know. That is wonderful. And I saw recently a girl on the Certified Lifeline Practitioner line does a song to it on YouTube now that is absolutely amazing. I love that. No, I didn't do that. But what I did was I remember me and Darren were talking back and forth, typing to each other on the Internet. He told me just I was feel, and hearing it. And I have a friend named David Sachs who was also, he's an author, and he took class with me. And he said, you know what you do when that happens? Just ask yourself, okay, where is this going? When you have those fleeting thoughts, you know, what are you doing? Like, in other words, when I would have these panic thoughts, I'd say, okay, all right, tell me your story. Where are we going with this?
Good.
And then it would just say nothing. It would just stay quiet.
And that's really about bringing ourselves, what you were just explaining, into present time consciousness and not staying stuck in the past. So it really fits beautifully, that whole Lifeline technique, into this continuum in that transitioning through change, because it really is that letting go, like what you just said, and just being willing and being open to embracing that there's a new beginning there. And it really goes to acceptance, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, because I would think very quickly of things before, like in the past I would have pined or thought too much or worried about a specific thing, or what if this, what if that. If this particular, my pet or a loved one popped into my mind, I would think of them and I would say, infinite love and gratitude, thank you, I love you, and then just continue on with what I was doing. And it worked wonderful. I was actually surprised. And I wasn't biting the bit to run home right away, because before I'd be in a panic to leave right away. No, I was fine. When it was time to go, I left. And when Sunday came, I took off. And I don't know. I know it was because of the Lifeline, and it was interesting. But still, I sometimes freak myself out and scare the crap out of myself about very dumb things that seem stupid. To other people, probably think so stupid. But to me, it's like I realize a lot of through See, Feel, Hear, and different techniques that it's different parts that are activating from when I was little. It's not even me as the 44-year-old woman. It's me as the 9-year-old child or the 11-year-old that's reacting. It's not truly me now. So at least
right.
I have that consciousness and that awareness that exists, because before I thought I was just gone mad in my mind, like I was just thinking cuckoo clock crazy stuff, but it's all part of the process I'm starting to realize.
Yeah, that's a brilliant process, and it really does exactly what you just brought up too, all those limiting beliefs that are just below the surface, but boy, do they drive our behaviors. It's so powerful. So Denise is, for those of you that are listening, Denise is talking about Dr. Darren Weissman, who has a program called the Lifeline Technique, and Jay are both trained in that as well, and it's a beautiful program, and so we'd love to give a shout-out to him, because boy, Jerry and I definitely went through a huge process of change ourselves and going through that. So I love your aha moments, Denise, and we really appreciate you sharing that, because it really does fit into this entire continuum model of change, and really recognizing that things can happen really quickly on the outside, but really that internal process is what really takes more time, and that we've just got to be patient with us. And depending upon whatever tools and techniques that each and every one of us has, makes a huge bearing on how fast we can process change.
Yeah, I agree. And infinite love and gratitude to you.
Hey, infinite love and gratitude. Thank you. Appreciate that. Let's see if there's anybody else that might have any comments. Is there anybody else that'd like to press star 2 and make a comment? If not, we're going to go to the chat page. All right. Jerry, you got one on the chat page?
I do. We have a situation that Janet has shared, and she's talking about how she had to go through downsizing and selling her home and move to something smaller. And she was found out that during that process that she was emotionally attached to her stuff. And she also shared she's still working through the process of getting rid of things. And in addition, she lives alone now, and she was widowed 9 years ago. So she is definitely going through that letting go stage. And one of the things I want to point out is that it's sometimes just getting into that neutral zone, it takes time. And as Janet has been sharing, this process has been going on with the downsizing for her for quite a while now, and it's taken her a while to get to that step of letting go.
Thanks for sharing, Janet.
Thank you, Janet.
Yeah, and hopefully you keep looking at this continuum on that transitioning through change model and see what some aha moments that you might have in there. So just remember the key points here are that effectively handling change can only happen if you recognize the fact that the external event of change happens oftentimes very suddenly, but the internal transition process takes a longer time, and you want to be patient with that. So if you're going to be successful in dealing with change, you also have to recognize your attitude towards it and your knowledge of how it works. So if necessary, we may need to shift our attitude towards change so that we can allow it and welcome new events, new people, and new opportunities into our lives. So, Janet, I'd like you to especially focus on this part, okay? So we're going to go into the right attitude towards change. The transition process for change is really about recognizing that even though change can happen fairly quickly as an external event in our lives, the internal process of dealing with that change happens at a much different pace, and it requires a whole different set of needs. If we approach change and think that all it takes is just dealing with the external event, that event itself, and we ignore what's happening within us as a reaction to change, then the change we experience will be more difficult to transition through and to accept and ultimately to grow from. And honestly, that's key there, because personal growth and development is what this journey is all about. We're going to do another quick activity just about shifting perspective. This is just a real quick one, but it illustrates this whole process. So what I'd like you to do, wherever you're sitting or standing or whatever you're doing, in whatever room, I want you to change up your position. So if you're sitting, I'd like you to stand, or vice versa, or crouch down. And shift it up. Even if you look upside down, I want you just to shift your perspective for a moment. I'll give you a minute to do that. And then I'd like you to notice what's different about the room when you're seeing it from this new position. So just take a moment to do that. When I first had children, I got down on my hands and knees and crawled around to childproof my house, just so that I could look at the world from an infant's or a toddler's perspective. And wow, was that an eye-opener. So I'm curious, did anybody notice a shift in perspective? I actually use this a technique too, and this is part of Lifeline, Denise, those glasses. And when we're working with the chakras, the energy centers, we actually do a technique where we have people put on different colored glasses that relates to the chakras, but it instantly triggers a physical and emotional and spiritual reaction. So, all right, we've got somebody to respond. Denise, I think this is you. Go
it's
ahead.
me. I'm just enjoying myself talking here.
We're glad that you are. It really makes it more fun for us, so we appreciate it. Talk away.
Okay, so I was laying down petting my dog, and then when you said to do that, I thought, okay, let me stand up. So what I did is I stood up and then put my head between my legs and looked down at the wooden floor. So because I thought, if I'm going to do this, I'm really going to do it up. So I went from laying here in a completely different mindset. I flipped myself over, and my head's hanging. And as my head's hanging, my little dog jumps down, and he's looking at me, and it just became so very funny. First of all, looking at the wood was funny, and I thought, you know what, I need to dust was my first thought. And then I just started laughing, and I go, oh, it's funny upside down. And then he jumps down on the stool, gives me a kiss, and he's looking at me like, what the hell are you doing? It was very funny.
He wanted to play too. You know, it is funny. My dog is always rolling over on its back, waiting to get its tummy pet. And I always wonder, I'll probably do that tonight, just do that and look up at the ceiling in that position and wonder what that might feel like too. So we can learn a lot from shifting perspectives like that. So great. Thanks
so
for
I think
sharing.
next time I start
Anybody
freaking
else?
out, I think I'll just flip myself over. I think I'll try it. It might work good.
You're funny. That's great. Love it. So
thanks.
Anybody else want to make a comment? All right. So here's just another thing to consider, a few other examples. Viewing a baseball game as from the outfield, as an example, would give you a very different impression of a fly ball than viewing it from behind home plate. It allows us to see things that you didn't see before, right? Or viewing a forest from a cliff provides a really different understanding than viewing at it from the ground amongst the trees. So changing our vantage point can really help change our perspective. I'll never forget the first time I ever flew and got to look up at the sky above the clouds. And I remember it was a really, really cloudy day in Buffalo, New York, and the airplane broke through the clouds, and you couldn't even see the sky. And as soon as we broke out from the clouds, it was brilliantly blue and sunny. And I just thought that was so amazing, and I was probably 12 years old at the time, and it's amazing how much of an impression that made on me. So here's the thing, though. Seeing a change from a different perspective can challenge our beliefs that a change is negative. It's important to explore a variety of perspectives of a change event and then choose the ones that support our most positive development. Because change is a way to personal development, and looked at from this perspective may not make experiencing change any easier, but it will certainly help us navigate through its transition more effectively. So let's see, we've got one other comment in the chat box. Jerry.
Mary Louise shared that to move, and life is all about moving. If we're not moving, oh no. Moving helps us to progress in all we do in life. That's very true. I agree.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mary Louise.
Thanks,
Absolutely.
Mary Louise.
And it's really, I love the expression, it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. So let's see if there's some change happening in your life right now that you can look at from a more positive perspective. You have another worksheet. It's worksheet number 3, and the title is What Change is Happening to Me? So pull out that worksheet, and I'd like you to answer the 2 questions on the worksheet, because here's the thing. We periodically reach points in our lives where what used to work for us no longer serves us and is no longer what we need going forward. Identifying what we need to let go of can help us deal with change more effectively and quickly and more efficiently. Change requires us to let go of something before there can be that new beginning. So I'd like you just to take a moment and think about a recent change that you've experienced in some part of your life, whether it's in a personal part of your life, career, a relationship aspect, or even physically. And then ask yourself the 2 questions on worksheet number 3 and answer them. What might to let go of in order to move forward from this change? And if I let go, what new beginning might be waiting for me? So just take a few moments and just dash down some notes. I'm going to be quiet for a moment and just give you some time just to pause and answer that, and we'd like to help you work through that. So take a few moments. All right, those can be some pretty provocative questions, and if we're really looking honestly at that, what do you need to let go of in order to move forward? Those are really powerful questions, and then also to appreciate the new beginning. So I'd love for some feedback.
One of the things that Janet is sharing is fear of the unknown around financial concerns.
Absolutely. And a lot of people experience the fear of the unknown, especially around the financial aspects of life. So, Janet, our question for you would be, if you let go, are you able to focus on a new beginning that might be waiting for you? What response did you have for that in your worksheet? Because for some of us with this financial freedom, there obviously is a lot of fear around that fear of the unknown, and then also with the financial concerns. But possibly when Jerry and I are coaching people and working with people, one of the things that's really important is to get people to look forward in their lives and to recognize maybe you've got some unique talents and gifts. Remember that process of going into the neutral zone and then going up into that new beginning? It's really about, instead of being terrifying, go to the other 4 opportunities there and to recognize that you just might have some opportunities for you to recognize where you can change.
Okay, let me share Janet's response. She says, yes, I believe I could get there, and that the reward would be less stress and less stuff, and joy and happiness with finding a new home.
Excellent. Good. And so, Janet, I know we'd love to encourage you to really focus your energy mentally, emotionally, in all aspects of yourself spiritually, and really focus your energy on that excitement of what's there instead of focusing that energy into what feels terrifying for it.
And one other thing I want to share, Janet, too, is all of the things in our house and around our house have energy. And when we start doing the clutter clearing and we start getting rid of the things that no longer serve us, that can raise our level of energy to the joy and happiness that you're talking about, just by literally clutter clearing and getting rid of the stuff that no longer serves you.
Absolutely, because that's part of what is in that phase of mourning and letting go, is that we need to release some of the things from the past to get into that neutral zone and then be able to focus on the new beginning. That's awesome, Janet. Thanks for sharing.
Fear is my number one energy that holds us back. This is from Mary Louise. We attract what we think about and focus on. This is my number one focus of motivation, is to let go of fear. Then I can concentrate on what goodness can I see and be today. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely, Mary Louise. It's powerful. I'm glad that you recognize that. Remember, think about that trapeze artist that has to have that faith and trust that when they let go of that one side of the bar, and then they're literally in a airspace of transition before they can grab onto the next bar. And it can take some time. So good for you that you both volunteered that. Thank you. Appreciate it. So just to recap this, it's got to be out with the old. The act of letting go includes giving up old ways of viewing ourselves and our lives. You're acknowledging something is ending when you do that. Often, though, we don't allow for a new identity to enter in because the tearing away of an old identity doesn't feel like growth. This tearing down is hard because it goes against the grain of seeing growth as a process of adding on to what we already are. The idea of taking away first for growth to happen feels foreign. But growth and development are not always an additive process. Sometimes it requires us to take a step backwards before we can take steps forward. This is a necessary step for something new to take its place. So change has brought you to this next phase of your life, with so much promise just beyond the horizon. Here's the big question. Will you accept the internal transition process that must take place before a new beginning can arrive? So next, we're going to look at what it takes to be able to once and for all accept the changes in our lives. Let's get back to finishing on this continuing in our process of change, in this transformation change process. So remember that you've got to give up something old in order to gain something new. So how can we be more accepting of change and the good that it will bring? Let's do another quick activity just to illustrate this. If you're sitting down or lying down, I'd like you to get up and just find a wall that you can stand next to. And I'm going to explain this first before you do it. So just get up and stand next to a wall, and I want you just to reach up as far as you can on the wall, and then just put a little mark or maybe a note or something, or just take note of as far as your arm can stretch up. So just take a quick minute to do that. Just go up next to a wall, stand next to it, reach up with your arm, extend it up as high up on the wall as you can. All right. Then relax. Just relax for a moment. Now, I'd like you to stand in that same place, but this time, I want you to really stretch up your arm as high up on the wall as you possibly can. Really reach up. Go beyond that comfort zone. And I want you to notice how much further you can reach up on the wall when you focus your attention on going higher, because that's key. Invariably, you'll be able to reach farther than you did the first time. Okay, I'm glad you did that activity. I hope you did. So go ahead and relax again. You can go sit or lie down or whatever you were before. This really just illustrates that when you reach further and you really allow yourself, you stretch yourself farther. You really can accomplish more. Simple demonstration. But you need to really ask yourself, in what ways do you hold back, especially when dealing with change? So here's a simple truth. Acceptance doesn't have to be big and formal. Accepting small change, one stretch at a time, literally and figuratively, can be enough. It's no different than what you just experienced in this activity by accepting your ability to reach farther than you first thought you could. So the next time you feel like you can't accept change, don't think of it in terms of absolutes, those absolutes of all or nothing, or 100% or 0%. Instead, think of accepting change in smaller doses, those smaller steps. And that can be enough to allow something big to unfold in your life. Change can happen in one part of our lives, but then we feel the effects, like the ripples, moving out into parts of our lives as well. We have a question here. Go, Mary Louise, go ahead, Jerry.
Actually, it's a comment.
Comment.
She says, "Good, Gretchen. This is the one I've been implementing since the convention. I got stuck in a rut, and it feels so good to be out of that rut."
Absolutely. Mary Louise, I second that one. Mary Louise and I are Young Living independent distributors, and we both were re-energizing one another at the convention. And part of it was really recognizing and taking a hard look at ourselves as how did we allow ourselves to get stuck, and how could we move forward and implement some changes in our lives. So thank you, Mary Louise. I totally second that one. I'd like you to look one more time at that continuum of change and look at that process of change and recognize in that slow transition to get to your new beginning, you might go through that skepticism, acceptance, importance, hope, and enthusiasm for a really positive emotional response. Key points here, just to reiterate: phase 1 is mourn and let go. Phase 2, entering that neutral zone. Those 4 steps of where it can be terrifying, along with the 4 steps to how that neutral zone can also be exciting. And then that 3rd phase of arriving at a new beginning. Anatole France, an early 20th century journalist and Nobel Prize-winning novelist, once said, "All changes, even the most longed for, have their melancholy, for what we leave behind us is a part of ourselves. We must die to one life before we can enter another." So we'd like to close our time together by identifying what it is we've learned and are taking away from this training. Here's a quick little exercise to do this. I'd like you to use your imagination and make it rich and vivid in detail, okay? Imagine this, that you're walking down the street when all of a sudden a reporter runs up to you with a microphone and a camcorder in hand. And the reporter knows that you just left the training on thriving in the midst of change and wants you to quickly tell an excited audience of 1 million viewers what was the most valuable for you. I have a good imagination with that 1 million viewers. But here's the catch. You must tell the reporter what was most valuable in no more than one succinct sentence. So, the camcorder's on and it's recording. What will you say that are some of your biggest takeaways in one sentence? What is your biggest takeaway from this webinar on thriving in the midst of change? Jerry, how about for you?
I think for me, the biggest takeaway is the reminder that change can occur with small steps.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Mary Louise shares that she's excited about new beginnings, that I'm no longer the me I was yesterday, and I have every opportunity to design the new me every day. I love that.
Absolutely. One of my favorite quotes from Dr. Deepak Chopra is that you can never step into the same river twice. So water is always flowing past us, around us, and through us. So this really is an opportunity to recognize that we can really shift our lives by shifting our attitudes and understanding a process, and to be patient with ourselves. I think for me the biggest takeaway was recognizing really that the internal transition process really can take a lot longer. So the final points that we'd like to make: change means that something in our lives must come to an end, and with every ending there will always be a sense of loss that must be experienced. But once this loss is mourned and we let go, the sooner we can open ourselves up to something new and promising to enter in. So as difficult as change can be, even if it is a positive change, if we just let it happen and allow ourselves to transition through the process of change, the quicker something new can and will emerge. We also want you to know that on our website, which is www.lightenupandthrive.com, we also run 28-day soul coaching programs from Training with Denise Lin, who's an amazing author, and it's a combination of feng shui and shamanism and soul coaching, and a really powerful program, and we alternate those every month. And we'd like to hear from you. You can always go on our website and you can contact us. We'd love to know how your process of change is happening. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate the time and energy that you set aside to be with us. Thanks again. Bye-bye now.